Hey, merci. So, hi, more of design thinking. So, thank you, Matt. For one thing, we share a few slides together, so it'll make it that much faster. Before I get going, I'd be really curious to see a show of hands. How many of you have actually led design thinking projects? How many? Oh, great. So now we're talking. Um, what do you think about the wallet project? There's a gap. There's a gap between what's promised and what we have to deal with. And in that gap, well, I wanted to share with you what it is that we've lived, we have worked, we found on working with professionals, and as well what we did with our research work. So one of the key things that I asked myself when that's the thing. That's good. Okay, one key thing I asked myself before a design thinking session is, who are the people I'm going to deal with? What are the non-designers in that group going to be thinking about? How can I get them on board? How can I get them to play with the flow so that it's we could play, so we could do things? So I've put David Kelly's definition, which you're probably very familiar with, up there, as a human-centered approach to innovation, because my take here is, once we've got the people, once we got the practice, I want to innovate. I want to go beyond just having a good sort of therapy session of having everybody talk together, which is really important. I also want to specify that the people I work with are often IT professionals. They're often, they take me in and say, okay, we're ready to start building. Let's do some design thinking. And we've missed everything that Matt has been talking about. They've already went through, and for them it's finished. It's done. Okay, we're ready to do something. Let's be creative. It's like, ah. So I have to work with people who are the owners of this process, who know how to build systems, and they want me to sprinkle a little bit of magic, design thinking wise, and make it anew again. So it's a real challenge. I mean, I really enjoy when they invite me and we work with users and we start from the beginning. But now my challenge is say, okay, let's talk about innovation and let's get this thing done. So I focus on that part of the process, because it's a place where strategic innovation is still possible, as well as formal sort of system-based innovation as well. And of course, innovation happens in the prototyping also, but at that place, we're at the widest place. So as you know, we go divergent, convergent. Even when we go divergent, there's still this moment of, oh, this is a great idea. Is it going to work? Is it not? Oh, yeah, let's keep going. So it's always this back and forth. But this is like the widest place. So this is kind of intimate, but I assume you probably have something like that of your own, which is the workshop plan that I very often use. So first, pick the right people to be there, make sure that they all hold a piece of the puzzle, whether they're content expert or they're process expert in terms of design thinking. Go over the discovery insight that we want to share with that group. Probably add a few layers. If we have end users there, well, we do a little something to ask them the question, what's your experience, to reactualize that. Then we do a creative warm-up to set them going, and then a first activity. The first activity is just to harvest the first layer of ideas, then coffee, caffeine, chocolate, food, often lunch, then second warm-up, and then second activity to hope to really get this open. So if we want to look at the first activity a little bit more, when we invite somebody, I'm sure you've experienced that, when you invite somebody to a design thinking workshop, they will be thinking, they'll be the day before and so on, making notes, oh, I got to tell them that, oh, I've got the best idea, and they show up in the door and they've got stuff to say. So the first activity is to allow them to pull it out, because if and you probably know that, if you don't, it's coming out anyway. And you never get to the really fun stuff. So I don't know what you use, but I may use straightforward brainstorming. They feel very gratified with that. Or the value proposition from Strategizer, which is a very organized, straightforward thing again. And this way you get a feeling that you're going from A to B, you've talked about the problem, you resolved it, and typically it's actually resolved 75% or 80% of the issues on board. And everybody in the room, especially if they're IT people, efficiency driven, they feel like this is good, we've had value, we really did this for a purpose. But what actually happened, it was really almost no innovation. It was incremental innovation that happened through integrating stuff that was really close to the initial discovery, insights, and analysis. And so we're still at the same point, but everybody feels like relieved. You know, they participated, they did their thing, so that's great. So the second comes in the second activity. The point of the second activity is to break that open, is to take the project and say, okay, how can we make this a little bigger, step back, see it better? And a good analogy for this is, you know, this riddle that we all know. It's like, how can you run 4 lines without lifting your pen and cross all the dots over there? Well, of course, the answer is by drawing bigger than the constraint of the project. And so at this point, what I try to do is I try to really have them explode the project early on, and then spend a lot of time playing on the edge of the new solution space. Like, oh my God, can we do this? Can we not do this? And usually very early on, if it gels, if it works, very early on they'll have a little vertigo. They'll have a feeling, oh, we can't do this, but maybe we can, and then they'll play, and all of a sudden they allow themselves to see this thing bigger, to get out of the zone. They've already delivered value earlier on. It's okay. So now they could really play. And what happens at that point is that instead of looking to solve little problems, they're focusing on the big experience of what it is that we want to deliver in near, medium, long term. And what's the real object here? And then at this point, like the project usually, I mean, I haven't had a group yet that hasn't went, this is what this project is about. This is what we're going. And they really have a step back, and it's kind of big. So at that point, there's a chance that breakthrough innovation may happen. Doesn't always happen, but there's an opportunity at this point. And it's a case where the whole is bigger than the sum of its part. And so typically, after any activity of that kind, of the first, the second ideation, you put all the ideas in a grid according to, you know, effort and the quality of the experience, or is it feasible, and is it innovative, familiar, and so on. And then you have like real value. You can say, we can decide on this and that. Well, my impression of that is that it creates piecemeal projects. You end up with a lot of, oh, I'll pick this one, and I'm not going to pick that one, and I'll pick this for financial reasons, and da-da-da-da-da. Once you've done the second ideation, well then, and we can't really see them, they're yellow, but you have a different layer of understanding of what it is that could really make a good project out of this one. And yes, you could argue that, you know, number 4 is on all 3, let's take it. Well, great, okay. Then we have numbers and we have all sorts of rationale. But you go from a system-focused function listing to seeing the whole picture from an experience point of view, which it's not one or the other. It just keeps building, and it's a very strong point. But, you know, guess what? It doesn't always work. It doesn't always work for at least 2 reasons. One is that non-designers and my dear IT people oftentimes distrust the process, and they cut off. There's something, literature says that if a professional gets to be shaky on how things should be going, well, they go back to their knowledge domain. If their knowledge domain is that let's be efficient, well, they're going to hone down on a really good, feasible idea and shut down the options that could have stayed open, and cut down and go too fast into a solution. So, and in the worst case scenario, they'll go back to the team and say, hey, that was a waste of time, and then you're dead. And so, the second, which is kind of more subtle, is that we may not actually be using the right tool all the time. We are, and Matt pointed it out, we are guilty of using and abusing one tool all the time. So, yeah, I think I have to agree with Natasha Jen that we are guilty of a lot of post-it. I mean, if I knew what I know now, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have invested in 3M. We should have all. This being said, a tool is an artifact, is a cognitive artifact. And when we devise a tool, it's to respond to a need, to a way of working, to a specific situation. It doesn't make sense that one tool could answer everything and everyone the world over. Unless it's magical, which it isn't, or that every case we look at is a repetition of the last one, which it isn't. We know for a fact it's completely not. So we got to look for other tools, or we got to work this out. So you've seen this just the last time, which is great. I'm not going to have to explain why the sketching tools and the sketch is such an interesting, open tool. There is a long literature on why sketching and design thinking should go together for all these reasons, to keep the solution space open longer so things can mature. Out of the sketch, what we like is the ambiguity, the impreciseness, the fact that somebody might be drawing something and then we see something else. I thought she was drawing a pig's head. It was a rose. But, you know, we still got on and be able to talk about this. And these little surprises are called back talk, as you may know. And they take us places when we co-design. So the sketch is really interesting, but it's really cool for product design. When it comes to service design, it's kind of messy. We need to sketch a lot. We have to commit ourselves a lot. I'm not sure, because I sketch, but usually people look at me like, oh, you can do it. And the other thing is that people don't sketch, period. So they write words on sticky notes and put it up on the board. And when we get in the motion of things and we're in that kind of team, we don't sketch either. We just write it down, put it up there. And that takes us away from the ambiguity. It goes faster. It's very conceptual. We miss all the materiality that's been talked about this morning here over and over. And so we think, well, this is how we got the idea that maybe playing with tangible, even though it's a much later place, Lego blocks, Playmobiles, don't touch clay. Way too messy, way too abstract. Could actually be a substitute for non-designer in the divergent phase when we do service design. And I'll tell you why. So now I'm switching to more of the research work that we did. And for the last 2 years, we've had a series of comparative studies where we compared paper and pen and tangibles. What we did, we asked a first group of 18 single people, usually MBA students or IT professionals, more or less mid-20s, early 30s, to do an ideation for a web page, part of a healthcare portal. One page would be for a patient, another page would be for pharmacists, part of that thing. And we give them pen and paper first, or second, and then Lego. Lego said, Lego! Okay, and then they did this, and then we said, well, we wanted to evaluate which one was, which one worked better. The second year, because the results were interesting, I'll tell you in a minute, we decided to redo the exact same thing, but having two people work together. So again, same stories, same patients, same pharmacist, and ask them to do website design. So the paper, this is what we offered them. So regular felt tips, paper all they want, Post-it all they want, and boy did they want it. And we even gave them a warm-up that was have them draw, to give them maybe subtly an idea that they could possibly draw. One person out of 2 years drew. And then the Lego, well, this was the kit that we gave them. A lot of abstract pieces, blocks that they could build stuff, or figurative pieces with little minifigures as well. So 18 people created 2 interfaces 1 year, 44, so 22 teams created interfaces the second year. We had all this evaluated according to the number of ideas. I'm skipping the academic bit. There's all sorts of footnotes here of where it comes from. If you're interested, I'll tell you more. But number of ideas, number of categories of ideas to see what the breadth of this was. Number of elements to elaborate an idea, and the originality level. And so the first 3 were counted. So it was 1 master's student, 1 RA, and myself. We counted separate, we came back together, argued like until we figured what was the real number of ideas, categories for all of these interfaces. And the originality was a little trickier. We gave that to 3 different UX lead, professional UX lead, and asked them to evaluate originality according to remoteness, so how far is it from the obvious, uncommonness, how unique is this, and cleverness, how pertinent is it? And pertinent in a UX kind of way. So they knew that we were talking about a patient and a pharmacist, that how cool is this to offer to these people? So this is how we measured, and ta-da, it worked. I want to say it kind of worked, but it did work. What worked is that the numbers that were tallied showed that the Lego actually brought in a higher divergent, more original proposal. I say it kind of worked because the people doing it, because the first batch anyway, were not prepared to see Lego. Some of them really were upset at us for having them work with Lego on a 3D objects, to work on a 2D interface. We thought, there'd be a cognitive step to take. Well, there was. It was an issue. But nevertheless, even though there was this issue, and with caveat, it kind of made it really better. So just to tell you what the results are briefly, on the first 18 set, well, 13, when we looked at all 18 pairs of interfaces that were produced on the first year, there were always 2. There was one that was always stronger than the other in terms of originality, as scored. Well, 13 were made with Lego. And what's interesting with that is that those that were interesting, it was whether Lego was done first or last. It didn't matter. Whether they hated Lego or not, didn't matter. Whether there was like nothing. It had only to do with Lego. So we thought, we got to check this closer. Well, what actually happened? It looked like Lego made it better in spite of them, which is not necessarily a good thing. But nevertheless, we were wanting to test this tool to see if it worked. The second year, so we had 2 people. We warned them about Lego a little bit more, so they knew, they were not so reluctant. And the overall divergent score for all these things were that the Lego scored higher. And when we looked at what made it score higher, remember I gave you the 4 things that we assessed? Well, same number of ideas, same number of categories of ideas. Actually, originality, now that they worked 2 together, was pretty similar. It was the elements that made a big difference. So the elements. So we looked at it because with Lego, they had to elaborate their concept with more Lego figures, more Lego objects, and than with pen and paper. So just a word on elements. The elements is every visual item they use to tell a semantic object. For instance, if I write a word on a post-it, it's one element. If I use 100 blocks to build a wall of Lego, it's one wall, it's one element. So, but if I use a little guy that has a sword that is fighting another guy, we have three elements. We have a figure, we have a subject, we have a tool that he's wielding because in the story that tool is important, and we have its enemy over there. In the healthcare system, that was medicine. So this was medicine fighting a disease. So we have three elements instead of one word saying medicine. In this picture, what we had is a really typical thing. So they often wanted to put a calendar on these web pages, and this person decided, okay, calendar, Lego, a Lego calendar. How do we do this? A grid-like thing. So they found this fishnet kind of thing in the pool, pulled it out, put it there, and they thought, a net. It's a network. Actually, we could tie in the whole network through the calendar, which makes sense because that's where they meet people and so on. And so because of the image, they went beyond the idea of calendar, and then they kept digging. So it's this idea of metaphor, talking through metaphor, that really sort of pushed them to think wider and bigger and diverge. So from there, I think that's where I'm going to share with you the takeaways that we have. I've got 8. It's not that long. I think we'll make it. And so the first one, don't even try explaining the metaphor thing. I mean, you get nowhere, you get blank stares, it is not actionable for them. Analogy works really well for designers. Non-designers, analogy is like, what? And it really frustrates them, and when they get frustrated, they go back to efficiency, and then all of a sudden, the whole thing shuts down like a clam. So instead, ask them to reimagine a new interaction story. And then ideas come up, a ton of ideas, if you ask them to reimagine the story. Have them move the pieces, encourage them to move the pieces. All of a sudden, sure, you can move Post-its around, but you can't ride a horse with Post-it, whereas you can with Playmobil, you can with Lego. You can do things that really induces sense-making into this situation. There's one thing that the Wallet project does not say enough, is to team, and this is what we've seen, is team non-designers with other trained creatives, so that these designers or other creatives can pick up the pearls that the non-designers pull out there and don't even see they're giving the whole team, so that the creatives can really help bridge and build and push and encourage and empower the non-designers on there to keep building. And this is kind of a really crucial thing, because in that moment when non-designer kind of get it, where real magic can really happen, and then you get real design thinking. Yeah. Don't be afraid of awkward silences. I mean, first time it happened to me, I thought, my God, am I so boring? This is terrible. But what it really was is that these people were completely into their flow. And they had shut down, and they were like, wow, we can do this, we can do that. And then, soon enough, they go from being very practical to boom, silence, to a different kind of speech, where they project, where things are like, we could do this. It reminds me of where they say things they never thought about. They're thinking and talking at the same time, and they're surprising themselves and the group as well. So enjoy these. Give them warm up at the beginning for sure. and show and tell at the end, because if your group has had flow, if your group has had moment, as they will retell the story, flow will pick up again, and you'll have more ideas come out, and that'll wrap up the project really nicely. Flow is like an oil stains. Once it's out there, it touches everything, and it just keeps expanding, which is why once big flows happen, people are exhausted, you you close the show down, and you come back the next day, because otherwise it's just repetition. It's like, oh my God, this was so good. Oh my God, did I tell you it was so good? And so you can't get out of it. Resist post-it as long as possible. This way, make them comfortable in the ambiguous place where things are imprecise for a while. The verbal written language tends to make us converge on solution way too early. So resist post-it, but then, I let them write some. So here we go with paradox and contradiction, but do it at the end. Do it once the 3D work is done, or make it a game. Just give them a few post-its. Say, if you had 2 or 3 things you really want to write down with words, what would these be? And make that a purposeful thing. But be careful of the writing post-it thing, because it comes back like an addiction. So you really have to tone this down. And then, just keep being playful. Because once you get the right to be playful, everything could happen. And then again, you're trained creative. Once everything gets playful, sometimes it gets really loony. So the trained creative can gingerly sort of steer it back in, so we're on track and on project. But this is pretty much what we've learned. And on this, I'll let you go to lunch. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Annemarie. Thank you.